What happened when the undercover CEO went inside his own company? He found exhausted employees, a toxic manager, and a workplace on the verge of collapse. But instead of ignoring the problem, he took action, firing the bad boss, fixing the broken system, and proving that real leadership isn't about power, but responsibility. This is the story of how one CEO turned chaos into change by stepping into his employees' shoes. Stay tuned to see how he transformed a failing workplace into one where workers were finally valued. Adrian Wells, the CEO of a well-known private security firm, had spent years building a reputation for reliability and efficiency. However, lately, his company had been struggling with a serious issue: high employee turnover. Reports of long shifts, low morale, and supervisors ignoring complaints had become impossible to ignore. When Adrian questioned his regional managers, he received the same generic responses. "It's just the nature of the job," or "we're working on it." But deep down, he knew something was wrong. Employees weren't just quitting, they were fleeing. Frustrated by the lack of real answers, Adrian decided to take a drastic step. He would go undercover as a rookie security guard to experience the reality of the job firsthand. Ditching his tailored suit for a standard uniform, he took on a position at one of his firm's most troubled locations, a high-rise corporate office with a long history of staff complaints. Using the alias Ryan, Adrian blended in with the team, ready to observe the daily challenges his employees faced. He had no idea what he was about to uncover, but one thing was certain: he wasn't there to watch from the sidelines. If the problems ran as deep as he suspected, he would make sure real change happened, no matter what it took. Adrian arrived at the corporate office just before the night shift began, adjusting the security badge clipped to his standard-issue uniform. The high-rise building, sleek and modern, was home to several high-profile firms, all of which relied on his company's security services. As he stepped inside, he immediately felt the tension in the air. The security control room, located in a small back office, was buzzing with activity. Multiple surveillance monitors flickered with live feeds from different floors. The radio crackled with calls from guards stationed throughout the building, and a phone rang endlessly without anyone available to answer it. He introduced himself as Ryan, the new recruit, and was quickly handed a clipboard by one of the exhausted guards, who barely spared him a glance. "You'll be on rotation with Ava tonight," the guard muttered before hurrying off to another task. Curious, Adrian scanned the room and quickly spotted Ava, a security guard who seemed to be doing 3 jobs at once. She was handling radio communications, monitoring the cameras, and preparing to go on patrol, all without a break in sight. Despite the clear exhaustion in her movements, she remained sharp, responding professionally to every situation that arose. Before Adrian could introduce himself, Marcus, the security supervisor, finally made his appearance. He strolled into the room with an air of indifference, lazily scrolling through his phone before half-heartedly barking out instructions. Instead of assisting the overwhelmed team, he stood by the doorway, making dismissive remarks about how they needed to toughen up. The contrast between Ava's dedication and Marcus's complete lack of effort was immediately clear. As the night progressed, Adrian watched how understaffed and overstretched the security team was. When an issue arose, an unauthorized visitor at the main entrance, it was Ava who took the lead, coordinating the response while Marcus continued lounging nearby, completely uninterested. Adrian could already see the problem. The guards weren't failing because they were unqualified, they were failing because they were unsupported and ignored. By the end of his first shift, Adrian had learned 2 critical things. Ava was the backbone of this operation, and Marcus was the reason it was falling apart. He had come undercover looking for answers, and now he was certain things were worse than he had imagined. The night dragged on, and Adrian continued to observe as the weight of the job bore down on Ava. Despite handling double the workload of any other guard, she never slowed down, at least not visibly, but Adrian could see the exhaustion creeping into her movements. She rubbed her temples between tasks. Her grip on her radio tightened each time she was forced to cover for yet another absent guard, and her responses became shorter, more strained. The final straw came when a last-minute request from one of the building's executives threw the already chaotic shift into complete disarray. The executive demanded a personal escort to their car due to a security concern, but with so few guards available, no one was free to assist. Marcus, who should have stepped in to handle the situation, simply shrugged. "Ava, go take care of it," he ordered lazily, not even looking up from his phone. Ava hesitated for a fraction of a second before snatching up her radio and heading out to handle yet another task that wasn't supposed to be hers. Adrian followed at a distance, watching as she walked the executive through the dimly lit parking garage. By the time she returned to the control room, her shoulders were slumped, her breathing unsteady. She barely had a chance to sit before Marcus spoke up again. "You're slow tonight," he muttered, shaking his head. "Pick up the pace, Ava." That was it. Her hands clenched into fists, her jaw tightened, and before she could stop herself, she slammed her radio onto the desk. "I've had enough," she snapped, her voice shaking with pent-up frustration. The room went silent. The other guards exchanged wary glances, knowing better than to interfere. Marcus rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. If you can't handle the job, maybe you should quit." Ava let out a bitter laugh, but it quickly turned into something closer to a choked sob. Tears welled in her eyes as she ripped off her security badge. "You know what? You're right." Without another word, she turned on her heel, grabbed her bag, and stormed out the back door. Adrian didn't hesitate. He dropped the clipboard he had been pretending to review and followed her outside. He found her leaning against the concrete wall behind the building, her hands gripping her knees as she struggled to catch her breath. "Ava," he said softly, taking a step closer. She wiped at her face quickly, avoiding eye contact. "You don't have to follow me," she muttered. I can't do this anymore." And in that moment, Adrian knew this wasn't just about a bad night. This was about months, maybe years, of exhaustion and being unheard. He had seen enough. It was time to act. Adrian stood beside Ava, watching as she struggled to steady her breath. The cool night air did little to ease the tension that had built up inside her. She wiped her face again, shaking her head as if trying to push away the emotions threatening to overtake her. "I should have left a long time ago," she muttered bitterly, "but I kept hoping it would get better." Adrian kept his tone calm, careful not to push her. "It should have gotten better," he said. "You shouldn't have to work like this." Ava let out a hollow laugh. "Yeah, well, Marcus doesn't care. And the company? They don't even notice. We're just warm bodies filling shifts until we burn out." She turned to him, her eyes tired but sharp. "And you? You're new here, so you don't get it yet. Nothing ever changes." Adrian exhaled slowly. He had suspected things were bad, but this wasn't just mismanagement. It was neglect, and it was personal for the people suffering under it. "What would change things?" he asked. Ava scoffed. "Firing Marcus would be a good start. Hiring enough people so we're not covering for 3 missing guards every night would be nice too, but let's be real. That's not happening." Adrian met her gaze, his decision already made. What if it did? Ava studied him for a long moment, searching for sarcasm, but she didn't find it. "Then maybe I'd still be here," she admitted. "But I'm done. I can't keep breaking myself for a company that won't fight for me." She slung her bag over her shoulder and turned away, disappearing into the night. Adrian stood there, watching her go, feeling a weight settle in his chest. He had gone undercover looking for answers, but he had just witnessed the cost of inaction firsthand. He wasn't about to let this happen again. Squaring his shoulders, he headed back inside. The next steps were clear. Marcus needed to go, and real changes needed to happen. Immediately. Before the night was over, Adrian made a call. Diana, the senior operations manager, was on standby for emergency situations, and this qualified. "We have a problem," Adrian told her, "and I need you to meet me at the office first thing in the morning." There was no hesitation in her response. "Understood." Adrian hung up, looking around at the nearly empty security control room. Tomorrow, everything will change. The next morning, Adrian arrived at the office earlier than usual, no longer just an observer but a man with a mission. He had spent the last week watching Marcus neglect his responsibilities, allowing his team to crumble under pressure while he sat back, indifferent. Today, that was going to end. As he stepped into the security control room, he found Marcus exactly where he expected, leaning against the desk, scrolling through his phone with a coffee in hand. The other guards moved around him like ghosts, too drained to bother acknowledging his presence. Adrian took a deep breath before stepping forward. "We need to talk," he said, his voice calm but firm. Marcus barely glanced up. About what? Adrian clenched his jaw but kept his composure. About the way things are run here? About why people keep quitting? Marcus scoffed, setting his coffee down. People come and go. It's part of the job. Some people just can't handle it. Adrian's patience was razor thin. No, people leave bad jobs, and this place is a bad job because of you. That got Marcus's attention. His expression darkened as he straightened up, squaring his shoulders. Watch yourself, rookie. You don't get to tell me how to do my job. Adrian exhaled, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he pulled up an email, the one with his full name and title. Then, he turned the screen toward Marcus. Marcus frowned, but as soon as he read the words Adrian Wells, CEO, the color drained from his face. You're joking, Marcus said, his voice weaker now. I'm not, Adrian replied, voice unwavering. I own this company, and I've spent the last week watching you ignore your staff, dismiss their struggles, and let this site fall apart. He stepped closer, his tone like steel. And I'm done watching. Marcus swallowed, his confidence faltering. What are you going to do? Fire me? Adrian didn't blink. Yes. Silence filled the room. The other guards had stopped moving, their eyes darting between Adrian and Marcus, waiting for what came next. Marcus opened his mouth, as if searching for an excuse, but no words came. You've driven away good employees for too long, Adrian said. You're done here. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, then scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief. Muttering something under his breath, he grabbed his belongings and stormed toward the exit. As the door slammed shut behind him, a weight lifted from the room. But Adrian wasn't finished yet. It was time to rebuild. With Marcus gone, Adrian wasted no time in taking the next step. He pulled out his phone and called Diana, the senior operations manager, who had been waiting for his update. It's done, he told her. Marcus is out. Now we need to stabilize this place immediately. Diana arrived within the hour, clipboard in hand, already compiling a list of action points. Adrian met her in the manager's office, where they reviewed the damage left behind. High turnover, understaffing, low morale. This site had been on the verge of collapse for months. Marcus hadn't just been bad at his job. He had created a toxic work environment where employees felt expendable. We're starting with hiring, Diana said, scanning through open positions. We need to get more guards on shift, as soon as possible. Agreed, Adrian said, but fixing the numbers isn't enough. We need a complete reset. Together they outlined immediate policy changes. No more forced double shifts. Guards would work reasonable hours with adequate breaks. Management accountability. Supervisors would be monitored, ensuring they supported their teams instead of neglecting them. Employee concerns would be addressed directly. Open communication channels would allow staff to report issues without fear of dismissal. By noon, Adrian had assembled the security staff in the break room, standing before them in his real role as CEO. The guards, still processing the news of Marcus's firing, looked skeptical. I know you've heard promises before, Adrian began, meeting their wary gazes, but I've seen what you go through, and I know things have to change. A few guards exchanged doubtful looks, but they listened. Adrian laid it out clearly: higher staffing levels, fair schedules, and leadership that actually cared. Someone in the back crossed their arms. What makes this time different? Adrian didn't hesitate. Because I was here. I saw it myself. And I won't let it happen again. The room was silent for a moment, then a shift occurred. Not full trust, but the beginning of belief. They had heard empty words before, but this time, it felt different. Now, Adrian just had to prove it. After the meeting, Adrian stepped away from the group and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his recent calls, landing on Ava's number, which he had saved after checking employee records. He hesitated for only a second before hitting the dial. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was cautious. Hello? It's Adrian, he said, keeping his tone even. From the security firm. There was a pause, then a sigh. Didn't expect to hear from you. I wanted to talk, Adrian said, if you have a minute. Ava hesitated again before replying. About what? Adrian got straight to the point. Marcus is gone. Fired him this morning. Silence stretched between them. He could hear the distant hum of traffic on her end, as if she had stepped outside to take the call. "You're serious?" she finally asked. "Completely." Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was a mix of disbelief and cautious hope. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Adrian replied. "I just wanted you to know things are changing. We're hiring more guards, adjusting schedules, and making sure no one gets pushed to the breaking point again." She exhaled. "That's good." A beat passed before she added, "It should have happened sooner." "I know," Adrian admitted, "but it's happening now." Ava was quiet for a long moment before she asked, "Why do you care so much? You were just some new guy last week." Adrian leaned against the office desk. "Because I'm not just some new guy." Another pause. "I own the company." A sharp inhale on the other end. "What?" "I went undercover to see what was really happening. And what I saw, what happened to you, was unacceptable." Ava let out a disbelieving laugh. "Well, that's a hell of a plot twist." Adrian smiled slightly. "If you ever want to come back, there's a place for you." Ava didn't answer right away. Then, finally, "I'll think about it. That's all I ask." "All right," she said, softer now. "Thanks for calling, I guess." "Take care, Ava." She hung up and Adrian lowered the phone. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. The following weeks were some of the busiest of Adrian's career. He didn't just implement changes, he stayed to make sure they stuck. The first major shift came when a new security supervisor, Jake, was brought in to replace Marcus. Unlike his predecessor, Jake had a reputation for supporting his team, not ignoring them. From day one, he walked the floor, listened to concerns, and even took shifts alongside his guards when things got hectic. His presence alone began to rebuild trust among the staff. The hiring process was expedited, and within 2 weeks the site finally had a full security team for the first time in months. Guards who had been forced to work back-to-back shifts now had reasonable schedules. Training programs were introduced to ensure that employees felt confident in their roles instead of being thrown into chaotic shifts with no preparation. The energy of the entire workplace shifted. Conversations in the break room weren't just complaints about exhaustion anymore. There were actual laughs, real camaraderie returning. Adrian made it a point to check in regularly, not as the CEO in a suit, but as someone who had worked beside them. He joined rounds with the night shift, sat in on team meetings, and made sure that the new management team followed through on promises. He had seen firsthand what happened when leadership failed, and he wasn't about to let it happen again. Then, 3 days later, something unexpected happened. Adrian was in the back office reviewing the final round of new hires when the door opened. He looked up, expecting Diana or Jake, but instead, it was Ava. She stood just inside the doorway, uncertain, scanning the room like she wasn't sure she should be there. He set down the paperwork. "Didn't expect to see you here." She shifted, glancing around. "I wasn't sure I was coming either." Adrian leaned back in his chair, keeping his tone even. "But you did." She nodded slowly. "I wanted to see for myself, if anything actually changed." "That's fair," he said simply. She studied him. "Is it really different now? Or is this just one of those things where it looks good at first, then goes back to the way it was?" Adrian didn't hesitate. "I don't do temporary fixes. If I wanted to pretend everything was fine, I never would have gone undercover in the first place." Ava was silent for a moment. Then, for the first time in weeks, her expression softened. "All right," she said. "I'll keep watching." And with that, Adrian knew the real work was just beginning. Weeks later, Adrian returned to the office, not as Ryan the rookie guard, but as Adrian Wells, the CEO. This time he wore a suit, a stark contrast to the uniform he had spent days in. As he stepped into the security control room, he immediately noticed the difference. The air was lighter, the energy more focused. Guards moved with confidence, no longer weighed down by exhaustion. The radios weren't crackling with desperate calls for backup, and for the first time, the break room actually had people sitting, taking real breaks. He walked through the building, quietly observing. In the lobby, a new recruit was being trained, something Marcus never bothered to do. In the surveillance room, Jake, the new supervisor, was reviewing schedules, actively making sure shifts were balanced. No one was being overworked. Then, near the elevators, he saw Ava. She was mid-shift, speaking with a new hire, giving them pointers on handling late-night security requests. She looked different, more sure of herself, more in control. For a moment she didn't notice him, then, as if sensing his presence, she turned. Their eyes met across the room, and she gave him a small nod, one of quiet acknowledgement. Adrian nodded back. No words were needed. She had decided to stay, not because he had asked her to, but because she saw the change with her own eyes. As he turned to leave, Adrian felt something settle in his chest. This wasn't just about fixing one location. It was about setting a new standard for every employee at every site. And this was just the beginning. The story of Adrian Wells' undercover journey teaches a powerful lesson about leadership, accountability, and the value of employees. At its core, it highlights how a company is only as strong as the people who keep it running. And when those people are ignored, overworked, or undervalued, the entire system begins to crumble. Adrian's experience proves that problems at the top don't just fix themselves. Poor leadership, like Marcus's neglect, creates a toxic work environment where employees feel trapped and unheard. But when a leader steps in, listens, and takes real action, meaningful change is possible. Firing a bad manager wasn't enough. Adrian ensured that long-term solutions were put in place, fair schedules, proper staffing, and leadership that actually supported the team. Another key lesson is that employees need more than empty promises. Ava's skepticism was justified because she had seen how workplaces often fail to change. But by taking real, visible action, Adrian proved that trust can be rebuilt through consistency and follow-through. Ultimately, this story reinforces that true leadership isn't about authority, it's about responsibility. The best leaders don't just watch from the top, they step into the trenches and fight for their people.